75% of black youth are not raised with a father in the home. It's the highest of any group in the country. It used to be 25% in the 1950s, so it's gone up dramatically in 70 years.
Okay, so you are blaming the fact that black people have not been able to achieve economic equality and advancement in this country.
They've had decrease.
Specifically and solely because of the absence of black
Not solely.
parents.
It is the most primary ingredient reason.
In this video, Charlie Kirk debates a Kamala Harris supporter about wokeness and affirmative action. Take a look at this.
Okay, I guess the claim I'm making is that affirmative action is constitutional.
Tell me about your claim.
I wanted to talk about affirmative action because we haven't really gotten to it, and it's recently been revoked based on the new Supreme Court ruling. And I firmly believe that affirmative action is constitutional and is a right that certain American citizens deserve. And I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, the 14th Amendment allows for equal protection regardless of race, and it's a colorblind amendment. And the whole idea of affirmative action is to try to give people extra boost based on their skin color or their racial background, which by definition cuts underneath the idea of equal protection.
Okay, so do you know why the 14th Amendment was founded and the Equal Protection and Equal Rights Act
exists? The 14th Amendment was a post-Civil War amendment. 14,
Yes.
15, 16, 17 were all during Reconstruction.
So what was it in response to?
Slavery.
Oh, and who were slaves?
Well, that's an important point. So do you think affirmative action will help heal the multi-generational problems of slavery?
I do. I really do.
Okay.
Because, so let's just talk about the history for a second. Slavery begins in the early 1800s.
Earlier.
No,
Slavery?
1816 is the beginning of slavery.
1619.
Oh, yeah, I guess it would be. Okay, first slaves come in 1619, doesn't end until 1800s.
1880s.
Then we go into Jim Crow laws starting in 1877, and black people are not given equal rights until officially 1965. Would you agree with that?
That's generally the correct telling.
Yeah, so, 1960s, 1970s.
But just so we're clear that black Americans were able to serve in office in the early 1900s. They were able to vote throughout the 1900s. But yes, there were poll taxes, there was Jim Crow laws, there was segregation. Of course there was. I mean, you have to be delusional not to acknowledge those things.
Okay, so we can acknowledge all of those things. Can we also acknowledge, due to the laws under Jim Crow, that black people were significantly hindered from economic advancement?
This is a really important question. The data shows not really. It was evil, it was terrible, but black Americans are poorer today in 2024 than they were in the 1950s.
Yes, why do you think that is?
Good question. So we have the Civil Rights Act, we have more benefits, more government programs. Something changed between the 1950s and 2024. So there's two answers to this question. Either America got more racist since 1950s to 2024, so like that 70-year period, because black Americans are worse off today per capita
Yeah,
than
I would
they
agree
were.
with this.
You agree with that? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Than in the 1950s.
There's a study that was done to talk about the black middle class. It says the black middle class has also grown substantially since 1967. Using the three middle income groups from census $35,000 to $100,000, it has more than doubled in absolute terms from 2 million to well over 4 million. It has shrunk slightly as a proportion of the total, but of course for good reason. More black families are above $100,000 in income earnings. If you prefer to change the definition of middle class slightly, say to the range of $50,000 to $150,000, it looks even better. It grew from 1.3 million in 1967 to 4.5 million in 2021, more than tripling. And by this second definition, it grew in percentage terms to 28% to 44%. So the black middle class has greatly improved in America.
Or there's another explanation, and I think the truth is somewhere in the middle, which is I think you would acknowledge that the disappearance of the black father has been the number one driver of black poverty in this country. Now, there are reasons for that we could...
Yes, the loss and the lack thereof of the black father being in the home has created and expanded the wealth gap between blacks and whites. See, a home that has two parents in it, with two people going to work, earning two separate paychecks, those individuals are going to have a better chance of moving from the middle class up to a higher class. The benefits of having two incomes means that the family may not have to rent for the entirety of their life. They might be able to own property as well. Two parents in the home going to work, that's four hands working rather than just two. And just think about it. From the 1890s all the way up to the 1950s, the black marriage rate rivaled that of whites. But after the Great Society plan, the black community was left decimated. They incentivized the single parent family. And no, we're not going to close the wealth gap if 80% of the homes are led by a single parent. And that is the issue today. 80% of black homes are led by a mom. There's no way that we're going to be able to close and narrow the wealth gap if there's only one parent at home working. It's not going to happen. And so one of the things that blacks need to understand and embrace is that our issue today is not the white man. It's not the Jim Crow laws or slavery. It's the fact that we have too many fatherless homes. Men have to be in their rightful place, supporting and pulling the load in the home and carrying the burden, because the role of taking care of the family, providing for the family, and providing security for the family, that was placed upon the man. The Bible says if a man doesn't work, neither shall he eat. If a man can't take care of his children, he's worse than an infidel. And who should we expect to be the main breadwinner in the home? Not always the sole breadwinner, but the main breadwinner. It should be that man. And when a community loses that, they lose their ability to develop economic prowess.
What do you think the reasons for that are?
Well, culture is one. Would you agree?
So actually, let's go back to the foundations of that
prison
culture.
pipeline, all that stuff. But can we at least agree that black dads not being around is a bad thing?
Anyone's father not being around is a bad thing.
Black dads not being around is the issue. Instead, she says, no, not anyone's father not being around is the issue. The issue right now is not so much about whites. You brought up a topic, young lady, about affirmative action being constitutional. And now we're talking about the wealth gap and the disparity, between the two communities, blacks and whites. And you can't acknowledge the fact that black men not being in the home is a detriment to black people? I mean, this is insane. Why not just be honest? Instead, we want to push the responsibility off to someone else. No, it doesn't work like that. We are responsible for our own families. Not Charlie Kirk, not the white man, not even the Democrat Party, nor the Republican Party. Man, we need to focus on our own homes. Dad being involved, dad being engaged, dad going to work and earning an honest paycheck, bringing that money home, paying the mortgage, paying the bills on time, having a high, hello somebody, Equifax and or TransUnion score. Let's talk about the ability to borrow credit. You have to have a good Beacon score to do so. Now, if you have the habit of purchasing things and not paying it back, you're going to have a low score. It's not going to work that way. And so our scores, let's talk about this even further. Your scores, as it relates to your ability to get credit, to get loans, to purchase a vehicle, to purchase a house, all of these things tell the picture of the individual. if you don't pay your bills on time, if you take out loans and you don't repay them, that is the history that depicts the individual. And so in order for a person to benefit from the system as it relates to even being able to have credit and to have a solid credit score, it requires payment history. And your payment history is the judgment list, rather, that you can look at to determine whether or not a person is going to be a person you should trust with money. And so oftentimes when you look at credit scores amongst minorities is oftentimes low. And these things are the examples that we can point to. The fatherlessness. You can even look at education, you know. You can even look at the credit scores. You can even look at crime, and we're going to get into that as well. These things create the picture and how a community is viewed. And so instead of us trying to force our problems onto other people groups, white folk, it's time for us to clean up our own mess.
75% of black youth are not raised with a father in the home. It's the highest of any group in the country. It used to be 25% in the 1950s, so it's gone up dramatically in 70 years.
Okay, so you are blaming the fact that black people have not been able to achieve economic equality and advancement in this country.
They've had decrease.
Specifically and solely because of the absence of black
Not solely.
parents.
It is the most primary ingredient reason. It's the most
so you
primary
think
reason.
it's the absence of black fathers?
Correct.
And you think, what else?
Let me share some stats with you as it relates to the impact that fathers have in the home. When a child has a father in the home, they are 39% more likely to earn mostly A's in school, 45% less likely to repeat a grade, 60% less likely to be suspended or expelled from school, 2 times as likely to go to college and find stable employment after high school, 75% less likely to have a teen birth, and 80% less likely to spend time in jail. Having a dad in the home matters.
Public sector teacher unions that have kept these schools crummy and kids aren't reading and teachers keep getting paid and we don't fire bad teachers. That's a big thing.
Okay.
War on police in our inner cities and not having enough police and not actually locking up criminals. Hear me out. For example, in Chicago, do you know that only half of all murders go solved in the city of Chicago?
That doesn't surprise me at all.
That's a problem, right?
That is a problem.
Yeah, so we need more police, more detectives to solve those murders. But I want to hear your points too. I'm talking too much.
So let's go back a little bit to what you said in the issue of policing. Mm-hmm. Now, starting in the 1980s and continuing onward, there's been a war on drugs. Is this correct?
I like the war on drugs.
You like the war on drugs. So
yes.
During the war on drugs, it created an epidemic of mass incarceration, specifically.
But, hold on, only if you're using drugs.
No.
Or peddling drugs. If you don't use drugs, then you don't go to jail, right?
So you believe that the criminal justice system is flawless?
No, I've never said flawless. There's a lot of people in jail that shouldn't be in jail. There's a lot of problems in any system.
Okay, so let's pause on that. So you believe that a lot of people who have gone to jail shouldn't be in jail. A small percent. What percent would you say?
5%.
You would say only 5%.
Correct. When you have a system of justice, you're going to have scummy prosecutors, you're going to have bad defense attorneys.
I have a question. Can I get a Google? What percentage of people currently incarcerated are black?
It's way larger than
hold on.
It's what?
Hold on.
It's way larger than 5.
No, I know, but the fact I'm saying 5%.
It's caused by the war on drugs.
Hold on a
So
second.
that's the point that I'm trying to make. Exactly.
Who am I debating? Am I debating here?
If your own government is pumping drugs.
Yeah, so
I want to make a quick
You're
point.
right. Black Americans are in prison far greater than the percentage of the population. So Black Americans are about 13 to 14% of the population.
Yes,
about
I know
half
this.
of all prisoners are black.
Exactly.
So blacks commit more crimes than whites do. They commit more murders, they commit more arsons, they commit more kidnappings. For example, blacks are 13% of the population and they commit 58% of all the murders.
As relates to the murders in Chicago, there were 774 murders in Chicago in 2020. Of those, 95% of the victims were people of color. And if statistics hold true, 70% of the people who murdered them were also people of color. Now, I know that it sounds, rather brash, nasty, or maybe to some as racist when Charlie Kirk points out that blacks make up nearly 13 to 14% of the overall population in this country, while at the same time, they account for, about 50% of the people who are incarcerated. That is a negative data set. It is. Yes, you cringe when you hear it. I cringe when I hear it. I get angry just listening to those stats, but it is factual. And he tried to tell her in the beginning that the issue that leads to this is fatherlessness. I just told you that 80% of the time, children are less likely to spend time in jail when a dad is in the home. If 50% of our jails are comprised of black people, if these fathers would just go home and be responsible, take care of their children, be an example, be a model citizen, you could reduce the incarceration rate in the black community by 80%. Does that matter? Talk to me. If you truly want to resolve the issue, if you truly want to stop all of this incarceration, this high trend of incarceration in the black community, bringing dad home is the way to do it. But they don't want to acknowledge that fathers not being in the home is the reason why we see these trends. They don't want to say it. Instead, they want to say, they're wrongfully incarcerated. At the end of the day, if you are selling drugs, you are going to get locked up. If you murder someone, you are going to get locked up. If you rob a bank, you are going to get locked up. No one's making you do that. You do the crime, you're going to do the time. But one of the best ways to mitigate these problems is for black men to get married and to take care of their own children and to be responsible. I know when you hear it, you say to yourself, why in the world would he say that? That's just so wrong. Who is he to say it? Is it true? Don't get emotional with me. Watch your face. I know you get mad right now. You're rolling your eyes. Is it true is the question. Is it true? Not does it hurt you when you hear it, but is it true? That's all.
That's not a war on drugs. That's a culture problem.
Okay, so let's talk about that culture. Black people have been legislatively subjugated up until 1965. I'll give it, honestly, it's later, but let's just say 1965. You do not think that 10 generations of legislative subjugation and slavery during that time, 4,000 black men, women, and children are lynched as the result of race riots in this country? You do not think that these things have a lasting effect? We have had 10 generations of subjugation and 4 of legislative freedom.
Of course they have an impact, but it's more on you to explain why things got worse since the Civil Rights Act. More violent, less fathers around, poorer. Why is that?
Because of mass incarceration and the unfair criminalization of black men.
But let's just take murders, for example. Why blacks are 13% of the population and commit 58% of the murders? Why is that?
Because people in affluent and whiter neighborhoods are not being policed at the same rate. There are more police.
I'm talking about dead bodies. There's no, we're not talking about policing, we're talking about murders. Why are so many blacks committing murders outside of their population?
Okay, let's take it back to some history.
I'm curious for an answer to that question.
I'm going to give you one. So let's go to redlining. Okay, redlining.
Redlining
yes.
is why so many blacks are killing each other?
No, let me finish my claim, and then you can respond. Is that okay? Okay. So redlining, federally mandated or sustained by the FHA, right? Separating black Americans to specifically impoverished and relegated areas of the country. We are incapable of buying homes and putting equity into neighborhoods with lower crime rates and better educational systems. We do not have access to things that would uplift and help our community. When you are put in an environment that promotes and reinforces social and economic inequality, you become desperate and are forced to do things that maybe don't align with your values.
What you're making an excuse for a lot of murder.
When you have
a lot of stealing,
a high concentration of a subjugated people in one area.
If you were right, when blacks in America did not have the same rights they had today, they were less murderous, there was less break-ins. Why is that?
So I'm sorry, are you trying to say that blacks thrive under subjugation?
No, I'm not. I'm saying I'm asking you the question. The data shows they were actually better in the 1940s. It was bad, it was evil, but what happened? Something changed. They committed less crimes.
Maybe they were afraid. I mean, 4,000 black men, women, and children were killed in violent lynch mobs.
That's your explanation. But I guess,
racial terror permeated American culture for hundreds of years.
Black America is worse than it has been
that affected
in the last 80 years.
The generational psyche of an entire group of people?
No, I'm sure it did. I'm not discounting that. I'm just trying to understand, why is it the more social welfare we've done, so we've spent $20 trillion on uplifting black communities, $20 trillion, and black Americans are poor. We've done everything that's been asked.
You haven't done everything that's been asked, though.
Great society,
because what is being
stamps,
asked?
Subsidized housing, Medicaid, public schooling, subsidized college. We're talking about $20 trillion that has been spent on the Great Society, and yet black America is poorer, more murderous, more dangerous. So there's an explanation. I'm asking you to explain that.
But we are not asking for handouts. We are asking for equity.
Hold on,
and
what
part
is
of
that? What does
equity
equity mean?
is
you mean taking from other people?
Excuse me, it means sharing, which is something that you guys seem to have a very hard time doing.
Sharing. So somebody has to explain why black America, and you haven't, is 13% of the population and commits 58% of the murders.
Black people have built and founded this society.
Thank you.
There you have it. Now the truth hurts, it cuts. It'll actually tick you off. But you can't argue with facts. I believe this. So goes the father, so goes the home. Many of the negative stats that are reflected in the black community can be pointed back to the fact that many of the homes are left with just a mother there. We can also even look at the education system. Former Secretary of Education William Bennett pointed out when school-sponsored prayer was banned in the public school system that there was a sharp increase in violent crimes and in teenage pregnancy across the board, not just with blacks, but with whites and every other ethnic background. And so all of these things stem from fatherlessness and morality, okay? We need to improve in the black community as it relates to men being in the house, earning an additional income that goes alongside their spouse, and being the moral compass for their families. You can't turn the tide if dad is somewhere missing. That's it. That's all, folks. I know it stings, but it's the truth. Thank you so much for tuning in. I ask that you like and subscribe to my channel and stick around for more content. Thank you.